Have you ever wondered how far someone can go to hide a terrible truth? On October 29, 2022, Alyssa Blackburn returned home to find her boyfriend shot, but her story was full of holes. Was she a victim or the mastermind behind it all? Let's uncover the shocking details of this chilling case. October 29, 2022. A date that would etch itself into the dark annals of crime. In a neighborhood shadowed by silence and sin, Jesse Geoghagan, 26, bled out on his own floor, riddled with bullets. But this wasn't just another shooting. It was an execution, cold, calculated, and carried out with the precision of a twisted vendetta. Jesse wasn't just a victim. He was the epicenter of a volatile triangle of drugs, love, and betrayal. Known in the streets as a small-time dealer, Jesse lived in what locals dubbed a ghetto trap, a house pulsing with illegal traffic barely held together by lies and paranoia. He shared this chaotic space with his girlfriend Alyssa Blackburn and at least 2 others. But the real danger wasn't out there on the streets. It was sleeping beside him. Alyssa Blackburn, 22 at the time, played her role like a seasoned actress. At first, she claimed innocence, said she was out walking the dog when the shots rang out. But surveillance footage would soon unravel her performance. The truth was darker than anyone expected. She wasn't just present, she was the puppet master. She had orchestrated the entire murder. Alyssa's role in Jesse's murder wasn't passive. She led the killers into the house. She pointed to Jesse's location. She pretended to be out walking the dog as the shots rang out. And in her phone, a chilling message sent before the crime: he won't be around much longer. But Alyssa didn't act alone. Enter Jacob Colville, 29 years old, covered in tattoos and filled with fury. He had a history with Jesse, and perhaps more importantly, an intense connection with Alyssa. Some said he loved her, others said he was obsessed, but everyone agreed the murder was all for a girl. Colville was the trigger man. He stormed into the house, found Jesse, and coldly assured him, "I won't shoot you." Then he pulled the trigger again and again. Witnesses said he fired even as Jesse lay bleeding on the floor. When it was done, Colville didn't just flee, he tried to vanish. Wig, glasses, makeup, a disguise crafted in desperation, but it wasn't enough. The law caught up. That moment feels like pure, calculated evil. The way Colville promised, "I won't shoot you," only to pull the trigger anyway, it's the kind of cruelty that strips away any trace of humanity. He didn't just kill Jesse, he toyed with him in his final moments. The repetition again and again makes it even more chilling. It wasn't rage, it was an execution. Colville showed no remorse. "I don't regret it," he reportedly said. Meanwhile, Bonner, the silent witness with a loaded conscience, cracked under pressure. At first elusive, he eventually confessed he supplied the gun. He watched the murder unfold. He saw Alyssa's cold coordination. And then came Lawrence Bonner Jr., 44, older, quieter, and pulled into this bloodbath through criminal ties. He knew Colville, but barely knew the others, his role. He brought the weapon. He stood in the chaos, but he never pulled the trigger. When questioned, Bonner cracked. Surveillance footage and guilt forced him to confess. He pointed the finger at Alyssa, solidifying her fate. Their connections were like tangled vines, suffocating, toxic, and impossible to ignore. Alyssa and Colville were close, far closer than Jesse ever realized. He invited Colville into his home, unaware that he was sleeping next to a traitor and opening his door to a killer. Their twisted loyalty to each other turned the trap house into a death sentence. But the web didn't end there. Inside that house lived more people, unnamed, fearful, and equally drawn into the darkness. One of Jesse's roommates had once shared a jail cell with Colville. He knew the danger creeping in, and while he hesitated at first, afraid of retaliation, he eventually came forward. He gave the police the security footage. He described the love triangle. He confirmed Alyssa's lies. Even those not directly involved, like Alyssa's parents, added pieces to the puzzle. Her mother, present at the police station, unknowingly revealed key information about the getaway car, a black Toyota Camry. She believed she was helping her daughter. In reality, she was tightening the noose. Alyssa played her role to perfection. Tears streamed down her face in the interrogation room. She clutched her chest. She begged for answers. But the detectives weren't fooled. Crocodile tears, one investigator later called them, and the evidence agreed. Neighbors had heard the shots. One described the chilling phrase yelled by a fleeing suspect, "I told them not to play with me." A black Toyota Camry fled the scene. Alyssa's mother would later admit, yes, that car picked her daughter up that day. The tragic irony, Jesse's paranoia, the very trait Alyssa mocked, was justified. He had every reason to be afraid. His girlfriend was plotting his demise. His killer was walking through his front door, and the people he trusted most were turning the key behind him. October 29th, 2022, a Saturday morning quiet until it wasn't. At exactly 10:00 a.m., the air in the 1100 block of Medford Avenue was shattered by the piercing sound of gunfire. Residents scrambled. Panic flooded the neighborhood. Phones lit up with desperate 911 calls. Someone was shooting, and it wasn't random. That morning, a rusted black Toyota Camry rolled to a stop in front of a seemingly ordinary house, the home of Jesse Geoghagan and Alyssa Blackburn. To neighbors, that house already carried a reputation. Whispers of strange activity, odd hours, and unfamiliar faces swirled through the community. But nothing had prepared them for what they would witness next. A neighbor peeking through their blinds watched in silent dread as two men exited the vehicle. One, a white male visibly armed. The other, a black male, followed closely behind. Neither hesitated. With cold intent, they marched toward the house. Within moments, gunshots echoed through the street. The neighbor ducked. More shots, then silence. What happened inside that house in those chilling seconds would later be revealed through surveillance footage, witness interviews, and a tangled web of toxic relationships. But that morning, all the neighborhood knew was this: two armed men entered and chaos followed. Yet what puzzled investigators early on was the style of attack. Despite initial reports calling it a drive-by, this was no quick hit and run. There were no shells scattered in the street, no glass shattered from a moving vehicle. The shooters had stepped out of the car. They had entered the home. This wasn't reckless, it was personal. The house itself, investigators would later learn, wasn't just a residence. It was a known hotspot, a trap house saturated with drug activity and frequented by people with criminal records. Jesse Geoghagan, the man who would die that day, was not a stranger to the underworld. But this wasn't a drug bust gone wrong. This was something darker. The Camry became the first major clue. Its presence was no coincidence. Described by multiple witnesses as an old beat-up black sedan, it became the focus of a county-wide search. Later, it would be found torched, deliberately set ablaze in a failed attempt to erase evidence. But the fire couldn't burn away the truth. What came next unraveled like a twisted script. The white male, later identified as Jacob Colville, was no stranger to Jesse. He had been inside that house before. He knew its layout. He knew Jesse's routines. And most importantly, he had a connection to Alyssa Blackburn, Jesse's live-in girlfriend. The very same Alyssa who claimed in those first interviews that she was out walking the dog when the shots were fired. But video footage told a different story. She was there. She opened the door. She led the killers inside. As for the second man, Lawrence Bonner Jr., his role became clearer as the days unfolded. He was the supplier, the one who brought the gun, a supporting player in a grim scene caught between loyalty and self-preservation. He didn't pull the trigger, but he didn't stop it either. That morning, what began as a seemingly isolated shooting was the opening act in a premeditated murder, one fueled by jealousy, betrayal, and a deadly triangle between Jesse, Alyssa, and Colville. The neighborhood had sensed something was wrong. The house was different. Alyssa had been acting strangely. And Jesse had grown more paranoid. He stopped people from knowing the house's address. He kept close watch on who came and went. He knew somehow danger was near. And while the gunshots stopped ringing by 10:05 a.m., the echoes of what happened inside that house would haunt Medford Avenue and the nation for years to come. But what unfolded at exactly 2:00 p.m. was no warning shot. It was the execution. It began with a scream. A male voice, raw, desperate, terrified, pierced the air. Then more gunfire. Escambia County Dispatch lit up once again. Another wave of 911 calls flooded in from shaken neighbors. The reports were nearly identical. Gunshots, a man screaming for help. Police raced toward the address. They were already growing familiar with the worn-down house occupied by Jesse Geoghagan and Alyssa Blackburn. What they found inside was a scene straight out of a nightmare. Jesse Geoghagan was crumpled on the living room floor. He'd been shot multiple times in the stomach and the legs. Blood pooled beneath him, soaking into the stained carpet. He was barely conscious, his breathing shallow, life slipping fast. Standing nearby, seemingly dazed but unharmed, was Alyssa Blackburn, Jesse's girlfriend. Her face was twisted in what looked like shock. Her words came quickly rehearsed. She claimed she had just returned from walking the dog, claimed she had no idea who would want to hurt Jesse, claimed the attack had happened while she was gone. She painted a picture of a drive-by shooting, but something felt off. Officers noted the absence of gunfire outside, no shattered windows, no shell casings on the street. The chaos had occurred inside. Someone had entered the house, someone had aimed, someone had fired to kill. Paramedics arrived swiftly, loading Jesse onto a soft stretcher. He was unresponsive. To Alyssa, it may have looked like he was already gone. Her reaction: tears, hysterics, grief, or at least something that looked like it. But detectives weren't convinced. This wasn't the first call of the day. This was the second act. And now, with a man dying and a story full of holes, the investigation was no longer a question of what happened. It became who made it happen. The inconsistencies began to pile up quickly. If Alyssa had just walked in, why were there no signs of a forced entry? Why was there surveillance footage showing her earlier that day? Not walking the dog, but standing inside the house interacting with two suspicious men. She had said she didn't recognize the attackers, but neighbors had seen a white man with a gun and a black man beside him enter that house earlier that day. Both fit the descriptions of Jacob Colville and Lawrence Bonner Jr. As crime scene analysts combed through the living room, they found bullet casings fired from a close range. This wasn't a random act. It was surgical, purposeful, designed to end a life. Then came the biggest twist. A security camera hidden across the street had captured more than Alyssa thought. It showed her opening the front door. It showed Colville and Bonner entering. And it showed Alyssa never leaving to walk any dog. That footage shattered her story. And suddenly, she wasn't just Jesse's distraught girlfriend. She was the prime suspect in a carefully planned assassination. The timeline grew tighter. By 2:00 p.m., Jesse was down. By 2:10 p.m., Alyssa was giving a version of events already in question. And by 2:30 p.m., detectives were circling in. As Jesse fought for his life in a hospital bed, officers began collecting every thread text messages from Alyssa's phone, hinting at premeditation. Bonner's eventual confession that confirmed her presence during the attack, and the realization that Colville, the suspected shooter, had vanished. It was no longer just about who pulled the trigger. It was about who unlocked the door, and who stood silently while the bullets flew. By nightfall, Jesse was gone. His body, riddled with wounds, succumbed to trauma that no ER could reverse. The house that once echoed with whispers of illegal trade and broken love now sat under floodlights, surrounded by yellow tape and detectives with questions. Why had Alyssa lied? Why had she claimed innocence, and what drove her to turn on the man she lived with, the man she had once called my love? Answers would come through Bonner's cooperation, through recovered messages, and through Alyssa's collapsing facade. But in that chilling window of time between 2:00 p.m. and Jesse's last breath, the final fatal act of this twisted plot unfolded. It wasn't just another shooting. It was a betrayal sealed in gunfire. As the blood dried on the floor of 1100 Medford Avenue, the focus shifted. Jesse Geoghagan had been rushed to the hospital clinging to life. But as paramedics disappeared down the street, sirens fading, a different storm began to brew inside the mind of Deputy Tinch and in the vacant, blinking eyes of Alyssa Blackburn. It was sometime after 2:00 p.m. The October sun dipping low, casting long, chilling shadows across the driveway where officers now gathered. Alyssa stood there, pale hands trembling or pretending to. The story she told was fragile from the start. I wasn't home, she insisted. She claimed she had been out walking her dog, returning only to find Jesse lying in a pool of blood. She denied calling 911. She said she had no idea who the attackers were. Her voice shook. Her eyes welled up. But beneath the surface, something didn't sit right. Deputy Tinch pressed gently at first, but each answer Alyssa gave led to a new crack in her story. When asked again about the emergency call, she faltered, then admitted she had called after all, not because she'd forgotten, but because the lie had slipped. The inconsistencies piled up like evidence bags. She said she had just moved in 2 days ago, but the house told a different story. The furniture was lived in, The kitchen used, the mess embedded deep into the floorboard suggested a home long occupied, not a temporary stop. And then came the first real break. A neighbor had come forward, nervous voice low. They spoke to Deputy Brissett and described in detail what they had seen earlier that day, a rundown black Toyota Camry parked outside Jesse's house. 2 men had exited, one white, one black. The white man carried a gun. Moments later, shots rang out. But before that, a voice. Her parents arrived at the scene shortly after. Her mother panicked, wrapped her daughter in shaky arms. Her father stayed quiet, his eyes scanning the scene. Police allowed them through, hoping it might calm Alyssa enough to talk. But if she was rattled, it wasn't fear, it was calculation. Detectives now understood Alyssa wasn't just in shock. She was hiding something. Soon after, Alyssa and her mother were escorted to the station. Inside the sterile walls of the interrogation room, the mask began to slip further. That moment feels electric with tension, like the air itself is holding its breath. You can almost see Alyssa sitting there under the soft, sterile light, trying to hold her story together, while the truth keeps bleeding through the cracks. The calmness of the interrogation room only makes it worse, that quiet, suffocating kind of silence that forces you to face yourself. When she admits to calling 911, it's like the first thread in her web starts to unravel. You can sense the detectives leaning in, patient but relentless, knowing she's not telling everything. Under soft lighting and silent pressure, she tried again to weave her tale. Yes, she admitted now she had called 911. Yes, there were others in the house. 2 men, she said. One of them slept on the couch. Names. She hesitated. Every answer seemed rehearsed, but poorly. When asked to describe her walk, the route changed. When asked the time she left the house, she gave 3 different estimates. Her alibi was dissolving in real time. Detectives listened, observed, waited. They knew what they were seeing, the unraveling of a witness turned suspect. At this point, Jacob Colville and Lawrence Bonner had not yet been identified, but the neighbor's description of the men matched perfectly with what officers would later confirm. The black Camry, the armed white male, the eerie statement before the shots. The trap was closing. Alyssa's admission about the roommates opened a new door and possibly a new witness. If someone else had been home, they may have seen everything. And if that someone was ready to talk, the entire puzzle might fall into place. For now, detectives had what they needed: a string of lies, a failing cover story, and a motive beginning to surface hidden beneath Alyssa's crocodile tears and carefully staged panic. The girl who first appeared as a terrified girlfriend was morphing minute by minute into a co-conspirator. Her words were her own undoing. Her silence between answers was louder than any scream. Back at the crime scene, shell casings glinted under the harsh light, blood still soaked into the cracks of the wooden floor. And upstairs, inside Jesse's phone, were the final clues texts that hinted at betrayal warnings that no one had taken seriously until now. Alyssa Blackburn was no longer just a character in someone else's tragedy. She was writing the script. By late afternoon, the sterile walls of the interrogation room felt colder. The silence inside pulsed with a tension no one dared name, because everyone knew what was coming. Alyssa Blackburn sat stiffly in the metal chair, her mother at her side. Her hands were clasped, her lips pressed tightly together. But what cracked first wasn't her voice. It was the mask she had worn since the beginning. Detectives leaned in. So, who was the man that picked you up earlier that day? Alyssa hesitated. She said it was someone she didn't know well. A friend of her brother, maybe a friend of Jesse's too. She didn't know his name. She didn't know why he came. Just that he drove a black car, maybe a Camry. That word hung in the air like smoke. Camry. The same make and color the neighbor had described just hours earlier. The same car was seen pulling up to the house before the first gunshots rang out. A dark Toyota Camry, old, worn, and ominous. Pressed for details, Alyssa finally offered more. The driver was a white male, late 20s, tatted up. He had a ghetto style, she said, baggy clothes, flashy shoes, wild energy. The description matched perfectly with the man spotted by the witness across the street, armed, dangerous, and far from unfamiliar. But as the interview pressed forward, the tone shifted. That was when the detectives delivered the final blow, the news Jesse Geoghagan had died from his injuries. Alyssa's face crumpled. She gasped. Tears welled up. Her body shook as grief took hold, or seemed to. Her mother wrapped an arm around her, murmuring something unintelligible. But the room remained still. No one moved, no one interrupted. They were watching, and they weren't buying it. The cries felt too rehearsed, too sudden, the timing too perfect. These weren't the cries of a woman broken by loss. They were the cries of someone desperately clinging to a lie that was starting to suffocate her. And then another door opened. One of the housemates Jesse and Alyssa lived with had been brought in for questioning. He was nervous, guarded, twitching in his seat, but what he shared unraveled everything. He knew the shooter. He had met him before in Walton County Jail back in 2018. His name, Jacob Colville. Not only that, but he spoke the words detectives had long suspected but needed to hear. It was all over Alyssa. A love triangle. Jesse, Alyssa, and Jacob. But the real revelation came next. The housemaid had security footage, a video captured from within the house. It showed Alyssa, not outside with the dog, not just arriving home. She was inside, holding a gun. And seconds later, Jacob Colville burst in, weapon drawn. He fired. Once, twice, again and again. Jesse went down writhing, trying to crawl, but Colville kept shooting. It was cold, it was final, and it was filmed. The video shattered every word Alyssa had said. Not only was she present, she was an active participant. She wasn't a bystander. She was the inside player, the one who opened the door, the one who knew where Jesse was, the one who likely told Jacob where to shoot. The housemaid didn't stop there. He flipped through a photo lineup and pointed directly at another face, the second man seen with Jacob. A name followed: Lawrence Bonner Jr., 2 suspects, 1 dead victim, and a web that all led back to Alyssa. She hadn't just lied once. She had performed layer after layer, playing the role of grieving girlfriend while the body count rose. But now, with the video evidence, the identification made, and the motive revealed, her part in this deadly drama was finally exposed. Detectives stepped out of the room. There was no need for more questions. The truth had arrived, captured in high definition and sealed with betrayal. The dark waters beneath the bridge along Mobile Highway became the resting place of a secret too heavy to hide. Just days after the horror unfolded at the 1100 block of Medford Avenue in Escambia County, Florida, battered black Toyota Camry was found burned to a shell under the 11 Mile Creek overpass. The charred frame, still smoldering, screamed of intent to destroy evidence, to bury the truth. Investigators now had a smoking clue. This was no spontaneous act of violence, but a meticulously planned betrayal. The car's demise underscored one thing: someone had anticipated the fallout and tried to erase the tracks. The killers weren't careless, they were cold. As the days passed, the trap began closing around 3 individuals whose lives would unravel in a cascade of confessions. First came the arrest of Lawrence Bonner Jr., the man whose name would echo in the halls of justice, as the supplier of the weapon, the enabler of death, soon found himself surrounded by evidence he could not deny. In his interrogation room, Bonner shrank in his chair, his eyes darting as the video footage glowed on a monitor nearby. He watched the black Camry arrive. He saw the gun drawn. He saw the body crumple. And when the detective pressed him, the walls collapsed. He admitted providing the handgun to Jacob Colville. He confirmed that Alyssa Blackburn was at the house that afternoon, not as a victim of chaos, but as a key participant. She had tipped them off. He said she had set the stage. That black car, the walk with the dog, the alibi, everything was orchestrated. The magnitude of this revelation sent shockwaves. No longer was Alyssa merely the grieving girlfriend. She had a role, a part, a plan. Then came the climax. On November 5th, 2022, Jacob Colville was apprehended in Eustis, Florida, disguised wig, glasses, makeup, desperate to vanish from the life he had shattered. But he could not disappear from the law. With a loaded gun in his possession and drugs in his pocket, he was caught fleeing the scene of murder. When asked about his actions, Colville's words were chilling. "I don't regret it." Those 2 sentences revealed a man dead inside, ready for murder. Soon after, Alyssa Blackburn, now under arrest, sat in a holding cell, the weight of her choices pressing down. The evidence, the burnt car, the surveillance video, Bonner's confession, formed a cage closing in on her. In June 2024, the jury delivered its verdict. Jacob Colville, convicted of first-degree premeditated murder, sentenced to life in prison without parole. Two other names remained unresolved, frozen in the gap between accusation and judgment: Alyssa Blackburn and Lawrence Bonner Jr., both charged as principals to first-degree murder, both facing life sentences should conviction follow. The significance of each link in this chain was profound. The burning of the Camry testified to premeditation. Bonner's confession connected the three actors in the conspiracy. The arrest and sentencing of Colville showed the justice system's capacity to untangle even the most twisted of betrayals. But behind the courtroom drama lay something darker, a web of relationships poisoned by obsession. Jesse Geoghagan, the 26-year-old occupant of the house, was not merely the target of a hit. He was the victim of a love triangle drawn into a deadly game. The woman he trusted, Alyssa; the man she preferred, Jacob; the silent accomplice who provided the gun, Bonner, all converged on one fatal afternoon. As the dust settled and the sirens faded, the wheels of justice began to turn. The murder of Jesse Geoghagan was no random act of chaos. It was by all evidence a calculated execution. The case that unfolded in Escambia County, Florida, would soon morph from a local tragedy into a courtroom drama laced with betrayal, manipulation, and premeditated violence. Legally, the state didn't hesitate. All three suspects, Jacob Colville, Alyssa Blackburn, and Lawrence Bonner Jr., were charged with first-degree premeditated murder, a capital felony in Florida. The weight of this charge is staggering. If convicted, the defendants could face life in prison without parole, or in extreme cases, the death penalty. It was the state's firm declaration that this was not a heat-of-the-moment crime. It was murder in cold blood. The evidence stacked against them was formidable. Surveillance footage captured movements that could not be denied: the black Camry, the arrival of Colville and Bonner, the moment Jesse collapsed. Witnesses described everything from the vehicle's appearance to the chilling words yelled before gunfire erupted. Then came the bombshell: Bonner's confession. Once reluctant, he crumbled under pressure, revealing the plan, the weapon, and the lies spun by Alyssa to disguise her involvement. With this trove of proof, video testimonies, and an insider's admission, the case against Jacob Colville was airtight. In June 2024, he was convicted and sentenced to life behind bars with no hope of release. The courtroom heard how he executed Jesse without mercy, his actions as deliberate as they were cold. But the legal nightmare wasn't over. Alyssa and Bonner remained behind bars awaiting their trials. Their roles were just as sinister, though perhaps more shadowed. Prosecutors argued that without Alyssa's inside knowledge and Bonner's firearm, Jesse might still be alive. The complexity of their involvement meant their legal fate would take longer to unravel, each delaying a reminder of the case's emotional and procedural weight. Yet beneath the legalese and courtroom formalities lay something darker, a psychological undercurrent just as disturbing as the crime itself. The house where it all began was not a home. It was a trap house, a place where drug deals were routine, strangers came and went, and boundaries blurred between survival and self-destruction. Jesse, Alyssa, and the others lived amid chaos in an environment soaked in distrust and danger. Alyssa's descent into this world may have started with love, but it ended in lies and betrayal. Her tears in the interrogation room. The detectives called them crocodile tears. Her panic at the scene, a performance. And when the community heard the details, they too recoiled in disbelief. Psychologically, Alyssa played a double role: the grieving partner and the cunning planner. Her behavior hinted at a mind torn between guilt and survival, lying about walking the dog, denying her 911 call, and feigning shock when told of Jesse's death. Whether driven by fear, manipulation, or a thirst for freedom, her mask eventually slipped. Bonner's testimony placed her right in the middle of the plot, not beside Jesse but against him. Even more chilling was the silence of the house itself. Neighbors had long felt uneasy about the strange comings and goings, but it wasn't until the sounds of gunfire pierced the air that they realized just how close violence had crept. The community reacted swiftly: multiple 911 calls, immediate cooperation with authorities, even identifying suspects. Their vigilance played a key role in cracking the case. But despite their quick response, the emotional damage lingered. Escambia County wasn't just dealing with a murder, it was confronting a deep fracture in its sense of safety. The case exposed the hidden dangers living among them: the drug culture, the manipulation, the violence disguised behind closed doors. What began as a mysterious crime scene had unraveled into a tangled story of love turned lethal friends, turned foes and secrets buried in smoke and blood. The law had spoken. The community had awakened. But the scars, emotional, psychological, and social, would remain. The echoes of that day in October still haunt the block where Jesse Geoghagan once lived. And in the eyes of those who watched justice unfold, one question remains. How many more secrets lie behind doors that appear ordinary until they're shattered by gunfire? The Alyssa Blackburn case is a complex story of love, betrayal, and crime, with clear evidence pointing to a carefully planned plot to take a life. Alyssa, who first appeared to be just a witness, was soon revealed as a key accomplice, manipulating the narrative to hide her true involvement. Surveillance footage, witness testimonies, and her partner's confession helped investigators crack the case swiftly. This case not only exposes the dark side of relationships and criminal schemes, but also highlights the crucial role of technology, especially surveillance cameras, in bringing the truth to light.